Get out your paintbrushes, fellow adventurers. We're taking a shot at this outstanding 3D printed young white dragon miniature from Lord of the Print. This week on Short Rest Studios. Hey, I'm Judd. Welcome to another episode of Short Rest Studios. This week I'm going to show you how I painted and based this beautiful 3D printed young white dragon miniature from Lord of the Print. I used some really simple techniques, mainly layering and dry brushing, and I got to use a new material on the base, this Army Painter Snow that I've never used before, and I had a lot of fun doing it. So let's check out the journey of painting this beautiful miniature. My go-to primer is Rust-Oleum Painter's Touch Paint and Primer in 1 Matte Black. It's cheap, looks good, does the job. Now I'm going to mix some Game Ink Blue and Game Color Dead White to create this frigid blue base coat, light blue, and then everything else is going to just add to that. Next we have blue and green ink that we're going to combine together, and I'm just hitting some things like his horns, the ridge down his back, the top of his tail, to create a place where there will be some slight variation in color in the end. And that's kind of my strategy for this whole model, is that I'm laying down some undercoats with different colors and then layering whites on top to create a unified look but still have some variation in color in different parts of his body. And you can see what the whole back looks like here where I've done that. And now I'm taking some purple ink and coloring his belly with that. One of the beautiful things about ink is it kind of works like a glaze. It just kind of lays over the top of whatever color you have underneath. But it also acts like a wash in that it will collect in some of the low places and provide a little bit more depth of color in some of the recesses. What are you doing with black wash, Judd? It's too early for that. I'm adding some black wash on top of his limbs, the arms, and some of the other bony features of his wings, his legs, just to create a slight difference in color. There's a little bit of gray to that. It's going to create some shadow in the ridges of his legs. I'm putting it around his face and just some of the different places where there are lots of detail. Basically, I'm using this as a way to make these particular parts of his body stand out differently. So again, it's just about the color variation. Instead of blue or green or purple, I'm adding in a little bit of a dark color. And it also creates a little bit of a separation between, say, the blue-green of his back and the purple of his neck and belly. Now we move on to buff, bone white, and dead white. These are my 3 dry brush colors. I'm going to dry brush each of these in layers over all of those colors that I put underneath. The buff is going to give him a little bit of warmth, right? It's going to make it feel a little bit more organic than just a frigid, cold white. We want him to look like he belongs in the cold. I mean, he's a white dragon, right? But we want there to be a bit of warmth to him so that he looks like a living thing. And like I said, I'm brushing these on. I'm just giving him a layer of each of these colors. Still dry brushing on the buff. Now I just want to make sure I get on all the highlights, the ripples in the skin and the bumps and things like that, just to create some variation in color when we finish the whole thing. But I want to get it everywhere, all over his body. It doesn't have to be in every single spot, but I definitely wanted to hit those high points. And now we moved on to bone white, and we're doing the same thing. Typically when you're layering on colors like this, you're using it in smaller and smaller increments. But in this case, I'm actually putting on more of each successive dry brush color. Now I've moved on to the dead white, and this is the one that's going to cover most of his body. But you'll be able to see, especially on his back and on his tail, that the colors underneath show through: the blue, the purple on his belly. There's a bit of that showing through, just enough to create that variation that I wanted. But in the end, I want him to look white. But in truth, something that's white, like ice, wouldn't really be just white. There would be a lot of different colors in there, but the overall impression in the end is that it is white. I'm hitting that white dry brush heavy, man. That dead white is covering everything, and you can see that right now there are still places where you can see the buff color, but I'm covering that up, not to the point that it completely disappears, right? Again, it's about the variations in color that it creates. Now, you probably already noticed that the dragon's no longer on his base. Well, that's because I glued him on before painting, but then at some point he broke while I was dry brushing on that white. Broke some toes, but we'll come back to that later and fix him up and he'll look nice. And now we move on to a little bit of black wash again. And it's hard for you to see what I'm doing here, but basically I'm getting in the cavity around his eye, like the area around his eye socket, and I'm just adding that black wash in to create a little bit of shadow and to help bring out his eye more when I paint that in. So this is my homemade brown wash, and what I'm doing with this is I'm painting it over his teeth, which I left bone white. I did not apply the dead white to his teeth. But the brown wash is going to fill in the cracks between the teeth and make it look grungy and nasty. And now we move on to some blue ink, and I'm using the blue ink to paint the orb of his eye. I love using this heavily pigmented ink for things like this that you really want to pop. Hey, if you're enjoying this video, if you're finding it helpful, or if you just love staring into that dragon's deep blue eyes, why don't you do me a favor and hit that like button down below. At this point, I'm really loving the way this guy looks. I mean, I really think he looks fantastic. But something is missing. And so I'm going to take some black game color and give him a little bit of detail that's really going to stand out from the rest of him, because the rest of him's white. I'm going to paint all of his claws black, and I'm talking claws on the wing fingers, his thumbs, whatever the heck those things are, I don't know. I'm going to paint them all black. The claws on the tips of his wings, his toes, all of them. I mean, he was really cool looking before, just the design of the model, but adding that touch of black to his claws really gives him this fearsomeness that he didn't have before. I absolutely love the way this came out. By the way, I lost the footage, but I painted the inside of his mouth with bloody red to give it a real pop. And now I'm moving on to Stonewall Gray, because I'm going to paint his base. And I should have painted the base and the dragon separately anyway, now that I look back on it, but I was trying to do too much. I just wanted to do too much. So I'm going to do this the way I would do dungeon tiles, and just dry brush on that Stonewall Gray, hitting the highlights, filling in a lot of the color, but leaving enough of the black so that you get the sense of shadow and you can see the details in that rock, because the rock looks pretty cool. These guys are great designers. This rock looks almost as cool as that dragon. I could use this rock as a bad guy in my D&D game. I mean, look at that. And now we're going to move on to Earth, because we're painting the Earth, the ground. So I'm just going to put on some coats of this until I get it where I want it. And now we're going to move on to good old flat brown model color. And I'm using that to paint the tree trunk. And I'm just going to coat it, that's my base coat, on this tree trunk. All the way around, just cover it up. And then once we're done with that, we go on to Parasite Brown. And we're going to dry brush that on to the tree trunk to give it a little bit of highlight, to bring out some of the green, because there is some texture to this tree trunk also, because like I said, these guys are good designers and they made it look like a real tree trunk. And now we move on to khaki, because the dragon's going to wear some chinos. No, I'm going to dry brush that on lightly, and that's going to create a little bit more texture, a little bit more highlight on the tree. It looks like too much right now, but the next step's going to change that. Now I take out my homemade black wash again, and I'm going to put it all over that sucker. And that's going to bring all those colors together. It's going to tone down some of the highlights, and it's going to just unify the whole thing and make it look grimy and grungy and like it has shadows, and it's going to look a lot more natural. I'm going to tell you this. I don't apply this black wash to a miniature, only to the bases, to the terrain. Because if you apply it to the miniature, it just winds up making it look grungy and nasty, and sometimes that's what you want, but a lot of times it isn't. So now what I'm doing is I put on some white glue and I brushed it around the base, and now I'm getting my Army Painter Battlefield Snow and a little plastic spoon, and we're snowing. We're snowing. It's a beautiful dusting of snow on the rock. And then I decided, you know what, that wasn't enough, so let's go for like a good snowfall. and then I'm going to shake off some of the excess. Always a good idea to clean it off around the rim of that base because you don't want that to have little flecks of snow on it. I feel like that makes it look less clean. And now I'm putting on some more snow because apparently I wanted this to look like a dang blizzard. And now I'm adding a mixture of white glue and water to create some more adhesion. And I'm gonna then, guess what? Put on some more stinking snow because I don't know what I'm doing here. I went nuts with this stuff. I think I just fell in love with it. It looks so cool. I just wanted to put some more on it. And so I did. And you may be asking yourself, how long can he do this? A long stinking time. That's how long. I did it a long time. I put a lot of snow on this thing. And now I'm putting on some more white glue and water in order to apply one of these little army painter mountain tufts. And yes, I should have used tweezers. It would have been easier. I apply a little dot of that to the top, onto which I'm going to sprinkle some more snow, just because it makes it look like the plant was actually in the snow. And now I just have a few details. I just went back and touched up a few things, and then put some super glue on his feet, and glued him back onto the base. Super glue does not always hold as quickly as you think it should. And now I'm putting on some more white glue and water because guess what, guys? Guess what I'm gonna do now? I'm gonna put on some more snow. And there's an actual reason for this one. It's because I'm trying to cover up where his toes broke off when I knocked him off his base. Now we just gotta wait for the glue to dry and spray some finish on, and he's done. Well, adventurers, this is probably my favorite miniature that I have painted up to this point. Kudos to Lord of the Print for just a beautiful model. The techniques that I used were so simple, and it just came out looking fantastic despite my lack of talent. Thank you again for joining me for an episode of Short Rest Studios. If you would do me a favor, if you got some value out of this, like if you just liked it, if you learned something, whatever, if it did anything for you, hit the like button down below. It'll help the video get out to a larger audience, and it lets me know that I'm doing stuff that you guys like. If you have any questions or criticisms or comments of any kind on the techniques that I used or how dumb I was or anything like that, I want to hear it. I really do. So put it in the comments below. If you have suggestions on other types of miniatures I can paint, if you have suggestions for other types of techniques I can use, put that in the comments. I really would love to hear from you. And finally, if you want more of this kind of content, hit the battle axe down below to subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you next time for another adventure on Short Rest Studios.